the Tibetan people will be scattered like ants across the face of the earth. In 1950, the prophecy became fact when news reached Lhasa that China had invaded Tibet. In the past, the mountains had been sufficient to discourage invasion. Now, to defend themselves, the Tibetans had little more than their faith. To rally religious fervor, the installation of the 15-year-old Dalai Lama was hurriedly organized. His elevation to exalted rank, however, did not forestall the approach of the Chinese. For the monks who administered the government, concern for the safety of the Dalai Lama became so overwhelming that they consulted the state oracle. They believed that while in a trance, the gods would speak through him. In full ceremonial regalia, including a 90-pound headdress, the oracle delivered an unwelcome answer. The Dalai Lama, he said, should leave Tibet. The Dalai Lama accepted the decision. He was accompanied into exile by an army of servants and material possessions sufficient to burden the backs of 1,500 pack animals. After crossing the Tsangpo River, the expedition followed an ancient trade route toward northern India. Their destination lay beyond the Himalayas, 1,000 miles from Lhasa and the comforts of the Potala Palace. During the journey, every spot where the young Dalai Lama paused to rest became a sacred shrine. As a god king, he had been forced to abandon his throne. But to his followers, his presence had lost none of its power. To join him in exile, nearly 100,000 Tibetans voluntarily risked their lives on the treacherous mountain trails. In Dharamsala, India, the Dalai Lama ultimately found sanctuary. He now rules a miniature kingdom, a symbolic 2-acre domain that represents the vast, mysterious empire he left behind. He remains in exile as the spiritual leader of faithful Tibetans. It is unlikely, however, that he will ever return to the legendary land where he was venerated as a living god. In Tibet, the timeless monuments raised to honor a feudal kingdom remain intact. They still haunt the imagination, for if ever there was such a place, this was Shangri-La.
Don't you wish your foundation stayed more on your face and less?
Babies love things to play with. So if you're going for a visit, it can be fun for you and the baby to take along a toy like this. Oh, this is a very special kind of nursery with some very special babies. This little one is about 4 months old. She's a baby orangutan. This is the nursery of the San Diego Zoo, and she's just one of the animals they're taking care of here. That's Segobo and Siazan. They're baby North China tigers. They were born a month ago, so they're still too small to be cuddled by visitors, unfortunately. When they're fully grown, they'll be about 7 feet long and weigh over 600 pounds apiece.
The babies, including this rare pygmy hippo, are put in the nursery for different reasons. Some are ill. Some need special attention because their mothers neglected them.
This is one of the newest members of the family. She's a baby tapir. Around here, they call her the little watermelon, and she gets plenty of attention. Although you have to admit she has a face only a dedicated zookeeper or a mother could love.
The Vancouver Aquarium gives scientists the chance to study the beluga whale and collect information vital to its protection in the wild. Like most whales, the beluga communicates by using a variety of complex sounds. For biologist Stephanie Hewlett, observation of the belugas became almost a full-time occupation. In time, her patients would be rewarded with a rare, dramatic event. Kavna, a female, was pregnant. Because no captive beluga had yet given birth successfully, the staff was particularly concerned. They didn't know when Kavna had become pregnant. Therefore, they couldn't even estimate the birth date. The tension grew as the weeks passed, and Kavna became obviously well advanced. The birth could come at any moment, and by chance, Stephanie Hewlett was there.
Well, on this afternoon, I was down there and just about ready to call it a day and go home. And she just drifted into the middle of the pool.
Labor had begun, but with a complication. Baby whales usually emerge tail first. Any variation could mean a stillbirth.
A few minutes after 9, we realized that the baby was being born head first. Everything was going so beautifully, and then all of a sudden, here was a head first birth, and I really thought it was dead. Just before 10 to 10, the baby was delivered right up to the pectoral fins, and then it opened its mouth and it wagged its head. It was so fast. It was just so fast. It was just sort of pump, pump, and gone, and just so vigorous, like a little worm.
At the surface, the baby took its first breath of air and then began to nurse. The first successful birth in captivity made this newborn whale a very special creature. Because belugas usually inhabit Arctic waters, the baby was given an Eskimo name. He was called Tuak, which means the only one. The cycles of birth and death occur here as nature dictates. This is the Serengeti National Park in East Africa, a vast wilderness preserve. A mother cheetah carries her young to a new hiding place each day to avoid leaving a strong scent in any one spot. Because the male never stays with the family, she must raise the cubs by herself. When she goes out for food, they will be defenseless. Their survival depends on their concealment. Any predator finding the cubs alone would make a quick meal of them. At the age of 6 months, a cub plays the games that teach how to stalk and pounce and fight. By the time it is a year old, a cheetah is ready to learn how to kill. A herd of Thompson's gazelle offers the opportunity for a lesson. This is a training exercise, and the mother is looking not for an adult gazelle, but for one that is young and small. Now that the prey has been chosen, the mother demonstrates how to approach. The mother only stuns the gazelle so that her cub can perfect its hunting technique. Confidence in a new skill can lead to a dangerous encounter when wildebeest tempt young cheetahs. Wildebeest are powerful animals capable of surprising speed. The young cheetahs learn how quickly the hunter can become the hunted. Such defeats are not uncommon. Even mature cheetahs fail more often than they succeed. In the wild, survival depends as much on perseverance as on skill.
The kiwi bird is about the size of a chicken, but lays an egg 10 times as large. Believe it or not.
The family fearless dishwasher. You just put the dishes in here, along with about a gallon of water. Then you add the soap. Close it up. And start cranking. The family fearless dishwasher did not come equipped with a motor. You had to do this for about 10 minutes. Then drain out the soapy water, put in another gallon of clean water, and crank for another 10 minutes. It was a good idea that needed a bit more work, but it's an example of the inventive pioneering that's taken us from horse and buggy gadgets like this to the high-tech world of the 20th century. Through the years, inventors have been preoccupied with improving the automobile. A fifth wheel for increased maneuverability is a development that has appeared several times in automotive history. With it, a car can pivot into the tightest parking space. The fifth wheel worked, all right, but its bulky mechanism made it impractical. Inventor Horatio Kesterbilt's fan-cooled straw hat was another idea that didn't quite catch on. Common problems often inspired ingenious solutions. A turn of the switch started a soothing lullaby, and something else as well. With Dr. Baruch's automatic cradle, mother and child slept in peace. Today's inventions go far beyond the merely mechanical. Sophisticated electronics create visual magic. In a hypothetical case, 2 members of a board of directors have left a company and must be eliminated from a group photograph. To do this, the image is first scanned by a laser beam, then stored as electronic data in a complex computer. Now, with a method called digital image processing, a skilled operator can do more than just eliminate parts of a picture. Scanning both the unwanted element and other portions of the frame allows him to replace the removed image with an appropriate background. It is electronic painting, Magnifying the image permits fine finishing work and the elimination of any rough edges. Only another computer can discover the completed alterations. To the unaided eye, they are undetectable. The changes made with this system can be subtle but effective. An art director, unhappy with the color of a model's eyes, can break the picture down into its building block elements and replace shades of green with shades of blue. An effect that used to take hours of painstaking work can be achieved in minutes. The system is not limited to altering human appearance. It can transform the familiar skyline of Manhattan. After the existing buildings and their locations have been scanned and stored, almost anything can happen. Once the world's tallest skyscraper, the Empire State Building easily regains its title by doubling its size. For the disabled, new inventions provide new opportunities. Jane Walters, who was left almost totally paralyzed by polio, now hopes to achieve financial self-sufficiency by becoming a computer programmer. At the Vocational Rehabilitation Center in Pittsburgh, she will learn to use an extraordinary tool. It will give her the power to operate a computer without touching it. It is called the iTyper.
Okay, let's go through the calibration sequence here. The H, the delete, the 9, the 1, A.
A camera in the keyboard focuses itself on Jane's eyes.
Good, calibration looks good. Your eye's in focus. Good. The lens is picking everything up.
The camera tracks the movement of Jane's eyes and records each letter as she looks at it.
Okay, why don't you start with the line number 50 and a space.
The iTyper lets
The word
Jane do
hello.
more than select letters.
Hello?
Features such as a tab
Glad to
position
meet you.
enable her to space and punctuate, just as on an ordinary keyboard.
Now do the next line, line 60. Hi, my name is Jane.
The red light means Jane has looked at a letter long enough for the iTyper's computer to record it. After less than a second, she can go on to the next letter, and her name, Jane.
Okay, at the end of the line, activate the return key, and that'll make the computer understand what you're typing.
On I command, the computer prints out the sentence Jane has written.
See what the computer has to say. I'll leave you the book. Thank you.
Now that Jane has mastered the basics, she can continue studying on her own and pursue a career in computer programming. With determination and persistence, there's no limit to what Jane might achieve while in command of the iTyper. At the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, scientists work with a video computer system that seems to be a product of science fiction.
Welcome. I'm waiting for you.
Pay attention.
Go ahead.
Create a red oil tanker.
Where?
There. Put a blue cruise ship
Where?
east of the Bahamas. Create a magenta trawler
Where?
there.
Like the computer HAL in the motion picture 2001,
Where?
this system seems to have human characteristics. One of its computers senses where the operator is pointing. Another understands his verbal commands.
Where?
A third talks back.
South of Jamaica.
And a fourth carries out the instructions.
Make that yellow. Move that
Where?
north of Haiti.
Where?
Haiti. Put that
Where?
there.
Although it's still experimental, this system is evidence of the astounding potential of the computer revolution.
I'm waiting for you.
A cop on a mission?
One to a customer. Certainly that's all most people need when the item in question is a tombstone or a grave marker. However, there is the case of Henry G. Wooldridge, born January 29th, 1822, died May 30th, 1899, here in Mayfield, Kentucky. Wooldridge may be gone, but he made sure he wouldn't be forgotten. His profession was horse trading, his passion was hunting. Here, he's astride his favorite hunting mount, Fop. And these represent his hounds. They and Wooldridge were frequently in hot pursuit of fox and deer. Wooldridge was a lifelong bachelor, but apparently he had a strong love of family. This commemorates his mother. These honor his brothers, his sisters, even his grandnieces are remembered. Wooldridge himself lies buried here under this carving of a favorite shotgun. As for the rest of the statues, well, no one else lies buried in this plot, no one. All of this is for the late Henry G. Wooldridge, a crowded testament to a family and life he loved, one permanent resident and 17 monuments. In the densely populated city of Hong Kong, a lavish use of space would be unthinkable. Land must be carefully rationed, even for the dead. Workers spend as much time digging people up as they do burying them. 7 years is the maximum stay permitted. Regardless of wealth or fame, the deceased must be removed so that someone else can be buried in the plot. The bones taken from the graves are spread out in the sun. The daily exposure is part of a purification process. Each night, they will be returned to their bags. In the morning, they will be put out again in a process that can take as long as a week. The turnover is constant, but careful numbering and tagging ensure the bones that belong together stay together. Most of the remains are destined for one of the structures called Fo Tsang Dong Chong. They look like office buildings, but they are multi-storied cemeteries. Instead of going to a graveyard, relatives come here to pay their respects. Each of the 7,000 wall crypts becomes a small but permanent home for the bones which have been reduced to ashes by cremation. The House of the Dead is a place of constant activity. Though this is the end of the journey for the deceased, they are still part of the family. According to the tenets of ancient belief, they still enjoy the companionship, the food, and the incense of a family feast. The constant visiting of thousands of crypts by thousands of relatives means that in this cemetery, the dead rest in peace, if not in quiet. A place of utter solitude, deep within the Arctic Circle, proved to be an extraordinary burial site. This bay in Greenland is called the Place of Little Heaven, and scientists came here to investigate reports of a mysterious, shallow grave. It lay in the shelter of an overhanging ledge. The archaeologists knew this might be an opportunity to investigate another time, another world. Uncovering an ancient grave is always a moment of tense drama. The site can be empty, or it can hold a sensational find. The discovery surpassed all expectations. This was the mummy of an Eskimo woman, naturally preserved by the sub-zero weather. She died more than 500 years ago, well before Columbus discovered the New World. Within minutes, a second body was uncovered, and then a third. Eventually, 8 were found, 6 women and 2 children. All of them and their clothing were in a remarkable state of preservation. There was no obvious cause of death, and the mystery was deepened by 2 other facts. There were no men here, and no other graves in the area. The mummies were taken to a Danish laboratory usually reserved for criminal investigations. Because the bodies were so well preserved, they could be given conventional autopsies. X-rays revealed evidence of various injuries and diseases. Faded, but still visible, tattoos were evidence that the impulse to enhance appearance is a universal human trait. The bodies also offer the opportunity to study living conditions as they were 500 years ago. Analysis of hair samples revealed far lower levels of toxic pollutants than in modern Greenlanders. 1/3 as much mercury and 1/8 as much lead. Further examination of the hair also found perfectly preserved ancient lice. Some of the evidence was particularly tantalizing because it indicated what the Eskimos were doing in their last days. Even small details had meaning. Fresh cuts in this woman's fingernails were made by the knife she was using to make clothes and boots from fur. The most intriguing questions about the elaborately dressed women and children could not be answered. Why were they buried in such an isolated area? How had they died? The mystery of their final hours would remain shrouded in the past forever. It was almost as if the Eskimos, wearing their fine, carefully made clothing, were time travelers. They had survived the centuries not to tell us how they died, but how they had lived. They have come and gone, but they are remembered. The people of the place called Little Heaven. The sound we make when we speak is the result of one very basic thing, which has nothing to do with the language we speak or any training we may have had. We sound the way we do because of the air we breathe. It is air that makes our vocal cords vibrate and makes our voices sound the way they do. But suppose you didn't breathe the air, but something else, like helium. It's a harmless gas that is lighter than air. It's what makes balloons go up and up. And if I inhale just a little bit of it, it will make my voice go up and up. Listen.
Believe it or not. Wow.
Join the Sci-Fi Channel for all-new Weekends of Wonder. Friday, explore your limits in the dimension of darkness. Saturday, see your cinematic dreams projected in the dimension of imagination. And on Sunday, prepare for a blast of superheroic action in the dimension of power. Experience the sights and sounds that exist just beyond reality on the Sci-Fi Channel's Weekends of Wonder. Friday and Saturday beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern and Sunday beginning at 8 p.m. Eastern. Now, stay tuned for mysteries, magic, and miracles. Sci-Fi Channel next.
Hi, I'm Stephen Baldwin, and you're watching the Sci-Fi Channel.
I had to do I hesitate to even say this, but a ballet in a birdcage. And the night before we shot the ballet, Irwin had the cast go to this gathering, and champagne was flowing the next day. Oh, I didn't feel very good. And it was not the best ballet in the world. I'm hanging onto the bars going, oh.
As a receptionist, I try to help our patients.
Put together a puzzle with government experts determined to redeem mangled money. Swab out a rattlesnake's throat with professional venom collectors. Take a ride into the wild blue yonder with aviators who volunteer to be struck by lightning. Find out what happens when high winds collide with high-rise buildings. Bounce up and down in one of the world's most unusual automobile competitions. Sort through junkyards with an artist who transforms automobile parts into prehistoric creatures. Witness a test to find out how much wind it takes to blow a man down. See gigantic 100-foot-high waves batter a coast in Great Britain. The strange, the bizarre, the unexpected. These are the kinds of subjects a man named Robert L. Ripley challenged us to.
Believe it or not.
Besides being the lowest inhabited place on the face of the earth, there are two other things about the Dead Sea here in Israel that make it unique. One, you don't need this suntan lotion. Because of the heavy concentration of a chemical called bromide in the air, you can't get a sunburn. The harmful rays of the sun can't get through. It's like walking around under an invisible umbrella. And the other is this. You don't have to know how to swim to go in the water. It's so thick with salt and other minerals that it's almost impossible to sink. It's like lying on top of a gigantic waterbed.
Believe it or not.
The practice of controlling the growth of trees is called bonsai. It originated in China over 5,000 years ago. This California juniper has been in training to become a bonsai for only 5 years. It's just one of the more than 100 trees being controlled and developed by Los Angeles bonsai expert John Naka. And in 10 years, the same species could look like this. Gnarled by age, but shaped by hand, this apparently full-sized tree is actually only 27 inches high. To create such living art takes patience and persistence. In Washington, D.C., it takes the same kind of patience to work in a little-known division of the Treasury Department. It's called the Office of Currency Standards. What they do here is examine mangled money. It may be torn, tattered, bleached, or even reduced to ashes. But if it can be identified as legal tender, it will be replaced at no charge. The currency, in this instance a $100 bill, is put under a plastic grid so that it can be measured. The inspector can then determine if at least 51% of the bill is still intact. If it is, the person who sent it in will get a full refund in the form of a check. To make that judgment, the inspector simply counts to see if the fragment fills more than half of the squares. These bleached-out bills were verified as valid currency that had made an unfortunate trip through a laundry. The owner was reimbursed in full. The verification process is sometimes as complex as solving a jigsaw puzzle. For Inspector Verona Nelson, however, such challenges are a daily routine. The only unusual thing about these particular fragments was the cause of the damage. These scraps are what was left after hungry mice had enjoyed an expensive meal.
I start looking for pieces where I can duplicate. I form my duplication by these ends right here, where I do know that the currency are of $100 denomination.
Despite mutilation by mice, enough of the remnants could be reconstructed so that many of the bills could be replaced. In one recent year, inspectors examined, verified, and redeemed nearly $13 million. Some of it arrived covered in mud as part of resurrected buried treasure. Sorting through it was the job of Inspector Grover Smith.
What we have here is money that's been buried for about 40 years. It was brought in by an individual. It was covered with mud and was very wet. Though most of the money is in 5s, 10s, and 20s, we do have some large denominational notes. There are hundreds here, and there are also 50s in this one stack here. My job is to separate the currency, determine the amount that's in here, and get it verified, and then we will redeem the money to the claimant. We estimated about $25,000. So far, we found $16,000.
After 40 years in the ground, most of the currency remained well preserved. Even when the rest of the bill had disintegrated, the portraits of presidents were often sufficient to verify the denomination. These ashes were all that was left after a fire destroyed a citizen's hard-earned cash. Sometimes, despite almost total destruction of the bill, enough evidence is left to replace the currency, if the claimant submits an affidavit and fulfills other legal obligations. Small clues can sometimes lead to large reimbursements. The Treasury has provided this free service since 1862. Of about 32,000 claims processed in 1 year, almost 75% had happy endings. The issuance of new currency for mangled money no one else would accept. By handling what few other people would care to touch, Dr. Findlay Russell and his assistant Jerry Brewster have transformed the Arizona desert into a source for a unique and valuable commodity. Both men are scientists who collect such potentially lethal creatures as this scorpion as part of a continuing medical research project.
Yeah. Try to rock with them. Yeah.
The venom produced by the scorpion can be extracted and processed into life-saving medicine. Scorpions are only one of the desert's deadly but abundant yield. Tarantulas are also a source of valuable venom. In this demonstration of their collection techniques, Dr. Russell and Jerry Brewster display skills developed through years of experience.
Nice, yeah.
For inexperienced collectors, however, such expeditions would be extremely dangerous. Even with proper tools and training, caution is vital, especially when attempting to capture a diamondback rattlesnake.
Okay, this over here is a western diamondback, I think. Yeah, it's a nice one.
Despite their lethal potential, the snakes he handles have inspired the respect and admiration of Dr. Russell. Before the venom of a snake can be extracted to make medicine, the snake must undergo a thorough examination. In his laboratory in the College of Pharmacy at the University of Arizona, Dr. Russell and his assistant carefully prepare for the procedure. To determine if the snake is in good health, they must take a minute sample of the germ cultures on the roof of the snake's mouth. If laboratory analysis of the culture proves the snake is healthy, it will be milked on the average of once every 21 days. After about a year in captivity, it will be released back into the wild. In the meantime, it will stay here along with about 25 other snakes. Small but deadly, black widow spiders produce an infinitesimal amount of venom. To extract it requires the delicate use of special equipment that subjects the spider to a mild electrical shock. The venom released is one of the most expensive fluids in the world. It is worth almost $100,000 an ounce. It's incredibly costly because to get a single ounce, Dr. Russell will have to extract the venom from over 500,000 spiders. To milk scorpions, a similar technique is used. It, too, is a delicate process that requires special handling. To collect the venom which the scorpion normally injects, its stinger is inserted into a small tube. When an electrical current is applied, The scorpion is harmlessly stimulated to inject its venom into the tube. Simply by blowing into the tube, the venom is safely transferred to a piece of glass. After it undergoes several other processes which transform it into serum, it is freeze-dried for storage and shipment. In time, it will be used in research in the treatment of a wide variety of conditions, ranging from migraine headaches to cancer. Medicine to cure, made from venom that kills. Believe it or not.
Thomas Paine, famous as a pamphleteer during the American Revolution, was originally a corset maker. Believe it or not. There are three things that most Americans never forget: their first job, their first kiss, and their first car. Well, they may forget the job and the kiss, but an automobile is not something that's just a passing fancy.
This is the Merle Norman Classic Beauty Collection in Sylmar, California. Hundreds of thousands of people have come here to admire these automobiles, not as transportation, but as art.
Look at this beauty. A 1923 Avions Voisin, built in France. A star of the silent movies used to tour around Hollywood in it. His name was Rudolph Valentino.
This one didn't get you there in a hurry, but it got you there for sure. A 1912 Franklin Runabout. It came equipped with a mighty 4-cylinder, 18-horsepower engine and straps to hold down the top at high speed. Going downhill. Automobiles. They've put wheels under our pursuit of happiness. Maybe that's why most Americans have a fascination for them that comes close to being a passion.
In Hollywood, the national mania for machinery has transformed cars into stars. This is Batman's Batmobile. The Green Hornet's Black Beauty. The customized convertible that provided distinctive transportation for the monkeys. The Munster's macabre motor car that was half limousine, half hearse. The helicopter car piloted by ace crime fighter Dick Tracy. The speed coupe driven by Dobie Gillis. The love affair with the automobile has resulted in a thriving industry for customizers who provide motion picture companies with such fantastic creations as this. It was the star of the film Damnation Alley, and is but one of the futuristic designs developed here in the shop of automotive artist Dean Jeffries. Jeffries also specializes in a unique art form. He paints flames on the surfaces of old but very expensive cars. The first step in the process is done with a grease pencil and is deceptively simple. A job like this, however, demands a fee of about $500.
Flames started back in the 50s. We started off by putting like a little flame back by a header pipe or something like that would come out, and it shows hot rod, hot flames. So it's just something I just kind of feel with it. It's kind of an art form, and you start drawing it on there, and you look at it, and you try to catch the flow, and I've watched fire burning and flames on other things to try to get that movement of like the car is moving down the road and the flames are flowing out of it.
No two designs are ever identical, but all of them require the same careful application of masking tape to outline the flames to be created with paint.
The older cars from the 40s, 30s even, 50s and 60s, they really built the car then. It wasn't just a bunch of real thin sheet metal bent around here and there to try to form strength. They had strength in them, and I don't think you even know what you're getting anymore. With plastic and real thin sheet metal and no horsepower, and not much of a car to my estimation. Over here, I got one of my cars that I've already completed. One of the older styles with all the full flames on it.
It's a 1933 Ford. Brand new, it sold for $550. Now, it's worth over $20,000. Such customized cars are rarely for sale, but often on display. On 2 Fridays of every month, the parking lot of this San Fernando Valley restaurant becomes a showcase. The driver owners are not teenagers, but older men determined to hold on to the status symbols of their youth. The cars range from Ford Model Ts to Chevrolet sedans. They're expensive toys, but to their owners, they represent priceless memories.
Right on,
For a new generation of car fanciers called low riders, pride of ownership is expressed in a different way. For them, special modifications are required. By replacing the springs with hydraulic equipment powered by a trunk full of batteries, the car can be made to go up and down at the touch of a button. The use of such equipment on the street is illegal in most states, but as a form of competition, it attracts large audiences to automobile exhibits like this one in Phoenix, Arizona. The competitors are known by colorful nicknames. In this event, Ragtop Ralph is pitted against Tucson Willie. The object of the competition is to see whose car can make the highest hump. A competitor's misfortune creates an opportunity for Ragtop Ralph. To win, Ralph must switch the hydraulic pumps on and off to create a bouncing rhythm which drives his car higher with each hump. Winning hump was 22.5 inches. For his effort, Ragtop Ralph won a trophy and a prize of $1,500. Despite the attention lavished on them, most automobiles end up in junkyards like this one in New Jersey. In the hands of artist Jim Gary, however, portions of such rusting relics sometimes find new life and unexpected new forms. There is nothing haphazard about his search. He needs specific parts for specific projects.
Once I get an idea to build a sculpture, I have to go out in the junkyard and proceed to take about 14 cars apart. It's basically a long process of taking cars apart, stockpiling the materials, and then starting on the dinosaurs.
These were oil pans. Once put together, however, they will become the jaws of a prehistoric creature.
Well, I've been sculpting different types of things, but the dinosaurs are my big interest, and I also love cars. And at the time, noticing the shapes reminding me of animals, I went back out in the junkyard and started putting them together. And this is what I came up with. But I use about every part of the engine and drivetrain there is. There's roughly about maybe 500 pieces in some of the bigger ones.
The pieces needed to make one dinosaur can cost as much as $5,000. To put the pieces together can take as long as 8 months.
I build dinosaurs from the skeletons out instead of the skin out, where no one else has really thought about building dinosaurs. And from a distance, you really can't tell that these things are automobile parts. In fact, one of the things I find amusing is that the paleontologists from different museums around the country are all amazed at how close these things really are to the actual skeletons. And again, I'm not trying to sit down and say that I'm doing an exact copy of a dinosaur. This is how I interpret them, what I think they should look like.
Gary's sculpture has been honored here at the Boston Museum of Science and in museums across the country. A special exhibit is being mounted for display in Japan. Smaller pieces sell for as little as $500. Larger creatures have sold for as much as $200,000. Gary calls his creations Detroit dinosaurs. The shapes are pure inventions. Jim Gary has no formal training in animal anatomy, but he does know art and automobiles. Ronald Colt Snow of Los Gatos, California, adorned his car with 1,045 plastic horses. Believe it or not?
Your guess is as good as mine, but not anymore. And certainly not here at the National Severe Storms Forecast Center in Kansas City, Missouri. They don't guess. They know. The information that flows into this room does not concern itself with simple thunder showers or whether or not it's going to rain on somebody's parade. The people who work here are concerned with the kind of weather that can kill you. These pictures are coming from outer space, from weather satellites that keep an eye out for storm formations that create disaster, storms that dump hailstones as big as softballs, tornadoes with winds that roar in at speeds that can exceed 300 miles an hour. This computer stores and displays information about storm conditions as it is received and can recall specific conditions on specific days. You're looking at a day in August, 24 hours before a storm hit Houston, Texas. And this is the next day. Tornadoes, 23 of them, spawned by Hurricane Alicia, were tracked and warnings issued. The loss of property resulting from the tornadoes ran into the millions. This was unavoidable.
The forecasts, however, may have saved thousands of lives. When Hurricane Alicia hit, Houston was ready. In the wake of killer winds, wreckage cluttered the streets. Because of mass evacuation, the streets were empty. The central city had been completely closed down except for police patrols. glass panels designed to withstand 90-mile-an-hour winds were ripped out by the hurricane. High-rise buildings were flooded by wind-driven rain. Falling shards of glass and sheets of twisted metal littered the city. Such powerful winds are irresistible. In Great Britain, they combine with the surge of the sea to create monstrous 100-foot-high waves. The wind can also bring traffic to a halt. Sudden gusts are capable of forcing heavy trucks like these off the road. The killing power of wind has become a national statistic. Over a 7-year period, wind damage like this was directly responsible for over 2,000 deaths. To learn more about the causes of such catastrophes, engineers in Japan launched a major study. Their primary concern was the effect that a high-rise building was having on air currents in downtown Tokyo. To gather basic information, researchers set up wind-measuring devices in the area around the building. Using aerial photographs that depict existing buildings, other technicians created a map of the area so that an exact scale model could be constructed. When the model was completed, the high-rise building was put in position. It is the black structure, and in reality, it would be 36 stories high. The model was then mounted on a turntable and placed inside a wind tunnel. To check it for accuracy, miniature weather vanes were placed in the same positions as the actual monitoring stations. While the movement of the weather vanes was recorded by computers, the model was turned until the direction and velocity of actual wind conditions were matched. The same wind produced different flow patterns at various locations within the study area. After final adjustments had been made, researchers prepared the equipment that would allow the air currents to be seen. Liquid paraffin inside these special tubes created thin streams of smoke. Now, the researchers could see exactly what happened when the wind blew. One of the more startling revelations was that by simply going around the building, the speed of the wind was almost doubled. The research also revealed that when the wind strikes the face of a building, a violent eddy is formed that in nature would create a tremendously destructive force. The study confirmed what pedestrians have known for years. Certain locations can transform a mild breeze into a stiff wind. To find out how strong a wind a human being can stand up to, scientists in England conducted an experiment. Volunteer John Lees agreed to accept the assignment. His job was simply to stay on his feet as long as possible while researchers slowly increased the force generated by a gigantic fan.
80 miles an hour. 80 miles an hour.
At 80 miles an hour, the wind made breathing difficult and standing impossible.
Wow. That's the breathing and the balance. The breathing, I got to control my breathing. The balance, I thought I got my balance, and then all of a sudden, my legs went, and I was away. No way could I stop myself until the guy switched the button off.
The wind is only one of the destructive elements in nature's arsenal. There is another that comes without warning: lightning. The effect of lightning on aircraft is being investigated by technicians and pilots at NASA's Langley Research Center in Virginia. An F-106B jet fighter has been specially modified so that the ground control equipment can monitor each mission. The assignment of pilot Perry Deal in the blue jumpsuit and researcher Bruce Fisher is to seek out storm activity in the hope of being struck by lightning. One object of the research is to discover at what altitudes and at what temperatures aircraft can expect to encounter electrical storms. Special equipment on board includes a camera which is triggered automatically when lightning strikes. The strike is simultaneously recorded on the ground. The data collected includes altitude, position, and temperature at the instant the lightning hits. Lightning creates a spectacular show, but it passes harmlessly through the all-metal aircraft. These blotches mark the scars left by lightning, scars that passenger aircraft will not have to suffer because of research that will inform them where not to fly. Chinese experts claim that the leaves on ancient trees in China change colors to predict the weather. Believe it or not.
Once most people are done with it, they toss it into the trash. But that was not the case with one Ellis F. Stenman, who lived here in Pigeon Cove, Massachusetts back in the 1920s. Stenman was fascinated by newspapers. He read 5 or 6 a day. Then he decided to see if he could use them to build a house. This house. It's got a wooden porch roof and frame, but the walls are made of newspapers, ironed flat, glued together, and varnished. Still solid after more than 60 years. And no wonder. The walls are 215 sheets thick. By winding newspapers into tight rods like these, Stenman was able to fill his house with 30 pieces of furniture.
This piano is only covered with newspapers. These items, lamp, table, and chairs, are constructed entirely of newspapers, except for the rockers on the rocking chair. To build this grandfather clock, Mr. Stenman gathered newspapers from the capital cities of 48 states. A desk constructed to commemorate the transatlantic solo flight of Charles Lindbergh displays the headlines that heralded that historic 1927 event.
To build the house and furniture, Stenman recycled over 100,000 newspapers. And even with the help of family and friends, it took him about 20 years worth of weekends and evenings.
The dedication needed to achieve such unique results is shared by an artist here on the French Riviera who set out to build a dream house. A network of steel mesh provided the framework for a structure that had no blueprints. It was shaped almost by whim, following the dictates of the imagination of the man who conceived it. Artist and architect Ante Lovac wanted to eliminate straight lines and build a house that was all curves. To achieve his goal, he used the same sort of construction techniques used to build swimming pools, steel rods covered by sprayed-on concrete. To determine where windows would be placed, Lovac simply relaxed and looked around. If the view was impressive, the reinforcing steel would be moved until the view was framed to his liking. By the time construction was completed and a reflecting pool installed, the house was more than a home. It was a work of art, a flowing series of interconnecting bubbles that merged with the hillside on which they were perched. Unlike other builders who first design the exterior, then divide the interior space into rooms, Lovac's intention was to create an envelope around free-flowing living space. Separated by levels and by function, some rooms are furnished in traditional style. This is the dining room, a sensual shell brightened by bubble windows. The house has been described as a landscape for living in, modeled like sculpture. For Lovac, the house represents a revolt against conventional architecture. A small nook like this, he believes, is worth building just because it frames a perfect view of the garden. As a house or as a work of art, Lovac's creation is an impressive addition to the list of unusual structures that includes a fanciful boat built here, near Peking in China. This is Lake Kunming. It was once a royal resort, ruled by the Dowager Empress Zhu Qi. Until her death in 1908, she lived in splendid luxury, financed by embezzling the funds of her empire. At her command, this marble version of a Mississippi riverboat was constructed for her pleasure. To pay for it, she used government cash that was supposed to have been used to build real ships for the Chinese Navy. Made out of stone, the boat sits solidly on blocks of rock. The boat is now popular with Chinese tourists who come to admire the ornate decorations. Ceiling tiles like these are relics of a time when a self-indulgent empress could freely plunder a nation's treasury. Visitors also come simply to enjoy the view the empress once claimed as her own. Originally an extravagance, the marble boat is now an honored historical monument. The Chinese respect it as much as the French respect the Eiffel Tower.
This is one of the best ways to see Paris. Cruising through the heart of the city on the River Seine. The Eiffel Tower is probably the most famous sight here. But at one time, the Paris skyline included the Statue of Liberty. That's right, the Statue of Liberty.
The statue was built here in Paris as a gift for America. But as the gigantic sections were assembled and began to tower over the city, the people of Paris fell in love with her. To them, she had become a Parisienne. The statue was missed by many Parisians when, after a year, she was finally disassembled and shipped to New York. To console themselves for their loss, the French, always romantic, built a model 1/4 actual size and put it here on the Isle of Swans. Except for her size, she duplicates the lady who lifts her lamp above New York's harbor. Now, she looks to the west, toward America and toward her big sister. 3,600 miles away. Believe it or not. In a moment, discover why a sea cucumber turns itself inside out. Life is peaceful and largely untroubled for the creatures that live in an aquarium like this one. The Steinhardt in San Francisco. In the ocean, however, life is usually a matter of eat or be eaten, fight or get away. Now, consider the sea cucumber. It has nothing to fight with, and it can only move very slowly, but when it is threatened, it makes an extraordinary effort. Watch this. The sea cucumber protects itself by forcing its insides outside. Often, hungry attackers eat what the cucumber offers and then go away. The cucumber is still alive, and in time, its insides will grow back. It may seem a grotesque form of defense, but it works. Believe it or not.
Weekends of wonder begin when you enter the dimension of darkness. An evil scientist forces Randy to reveal her horrific alter ego. On She-Wolf of London, Satan's devilish daughter is determined to rule the world in Omen 4, The Awakening. An vengeful ex-cop uses a cursed antique for murderous means. On Friday the 13th, the series. Prepare for the scares in the dimension of darkness. Tonight beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern. Now, stay tuned for mysteries, magic, and miracles. Sci-Fi Channel next.
You are watching the Sci-Fi Channel. Roger, let's head
home. There's an episode called Little War. Stood out in my mind.
Forward march!
And this episode was about a little kid with his toys, soldiers, and comes across our group and thinks it's his friend's war toys. And of course he goes to war with us. And I felt that it had a lot of great symbolism.
The entire Phillips family.
Discover how hypnotism can take the pain out of going to the dentist. Soar triumphantly into space on a solo flight above the Earth. Find out what the shouting is all about in Italy. Explore America with photographers determined to create a unique series of portraits. Have a light lunch with astronauts aboard the space shuttle. Experiment with a modern quartet who make an art out of making noise.
Join Marie Osmond as she enters into the world of avant-garde poetry.
Ang logo bang, blago bang baso futaka, ooh.
The strange, the bizarre, the unexpected. These are the kinds of subjects a man named Robert L. Ripley challenged us to
believe it or not.
There are several good reasons for going to a bank. To cash a check, pay a bill, make a deposit, or simply to visit your money. George Washington is an old friend, a familiar face on the $1 bill. Thomas Jefferson, he's on the $2 bill. These other gentlemen are fairly well known. Honest Abe, Abraham Lincoln, is on the $5 bill. Alexander Hamilton is on the 10. Andrew Jackson is on the 20. And the stern face of Ulysses S. Grant graces the $50 bill. But now, the faces become a little less familiar. Let's see how many you know. The $100 bill, the gentleman who is famous for flying a kite. Benjamin Franklin. The $500 bill, a president assassinated in 1901. William McKinley. $1,000, the 22nd and 24th President of the United States. Grover Cleveland. The really big money, however, is over here. The man on the $5,000 bill is a gentleman we would all like to get to know a little better. James Madison. This gentleman is Salmon P. Chase. He was a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and before that, Secretary of the Treasury. His face is on the $10,000 bill. But that's not the highest prize portrait in this gallery. This one is worth 10 times more, $100,000. The man whose face is on this bill was once a school teacher and a president, Woodrow Wilson. And then there is the gentleman who lurks behind this mysterious veil. His figure adorns a $3 bill. It was issued back when banks were permitted to print their own currency, before the National Bank Act of 1863 gave the government a monopoly on printing money. This bill was issued in 1852 by the Central Bank of Troy, New York, and features a bearded gentleman in a sleigh pulled by 8 tiny reindeer. Santa Claus. Look deeply into my eyes. Or, if you prefer, gaze into the gleaming depths of this simple pendant. These are the tools of the hypnotist, but only in bad movies and second-rate books where mysterious swamis and Svengalis often use hypnotism for evil purposes. In reality,
Hypnotism is neither mysterious nor evil. It is a tool of medical science. It can be used in psychiatry and sometimes to ease pain in childbirth, asthma attacks, and the effects of migraine headaches. The effectiveness of the treatment depends not only on the skill of the therapist, but primarily on the ability of the patient. Although the therapist acts as a guide to relax the patient, only a person who wants to be hypnotized and is able to focus his or her mind can enter hypnosis. To measure the ability to respond to hypnotism, a test was developed at Harvard many years ago. A hypnotic procedure was recorded by an announcer who had never hypnotized anyone before. Then it was played for many groups of students.
If you will now please sit up straight in your chair, close your eyes, and relax. Continue, however, to sit up straight. That's right.
After a period of time, in every case, over 85% of those who listened to the tape entered into some degree of hypnosis. The results proved that hypnotism does not depend on mysterious powers or shiny trinkets.
I want you to imagine that this little bit of cotton wool is a baby bunny, and this is a mummy bunny. And when I turn on the engine, they're going to go round and round and round. But you see them going round and round. Isn't that lovely? Listen, now, I want you to pop your wee head back, and I want you to keep looking at these bunnies. And you're going to watch the bunnies going round and round and round. And very soon you're going to see a foxy chasing.
In a procedure used regularly with Dr. Smith's young patients, Jane's imagination is used to induce a hypnotic state.
And now I see your hands beginning to lift. So just let it lift. Your little left hand, that's lovely. Your left hand, how lovely. And you can see that lovely little foxy. Now what I want you to do for me is I want you to help me. I want you to help me to save the bunnies. Because the bunnies there, they're hiding again, you see? I want you to help me save the bunnies. What I'm going to do, I'm going to blow some air into that little toothy of yours. And I'm going to blow some lovely happy air, because you know it makes a funny wee noise. And we're going to blow the air on the toothy, and that will clean out the little hole in your tooth, and we'll let the bunnies go into that little hole and hide. Shall we? Oh, shall we? Oh, how wonderful. And see, this is the little thing that blows the air. And it's going to blow a little bit of air into that. You see the air blowing, do you? You see the air blowing? Now I'm going to blow that air in your toothy. Are you ready to help the bunnies? That's lovely. Oh, the air is not strong. That's lovely. Now keep looking at those lovely little bunnies now. And we're going to clean out all the dirt and all the rubbish out of that little hole. In this case, the cavity is fairly deep. It involves two surfaces of the tooth going from the biting surface right down to the level of the gum. Normally, this is fairly painful, and you're cutting through areas of where there's thousands of nerve endings, and it's not only painful, but it's very uncomfortable. Now, that was beautiful. Did you enjoy that? Did you? Was it fun? Tell me more about the foxy.
The mechanisms by which hypnosis can suppress pain has been the subject of serious investigation in the United States. One of the leading investigators is psychiatrist Martin Orne.
Altered perception depends upon focusing your attention and utilizes imagination. It is the ability to imagine deeply which seems to help individuals to modify their sense of pain.
Dr. Orne has used hypnosis to treat a variety of medical and psychiatric disorders.
Gervis is a 52-year-old man who developed premature Parkinsonism when he was about 35. This is a tremor of the hands and feet which tends to get progressively worse. In addition to Parkinsonism, he also has large involuntary body movements which have a psychological rather than a physical origin, and which are the main reason why he's totally disabled at this time. I'd like you to tell me how things have been going since you began treatment.
No, well. I feel like it helps a lot. You know? Every time I did the exercise, I seemed to slow down voluntary, involuntary movements.
Right, and there are really two conditions. One is that your right hand shakes like that.
Yeah, right leg.
And you at one time had both hands like that.
Both sides.
And the left was fixed by an operation.
Yeah.
And then you have the other kind of involuntary movements, which are the big involuntary movements, which bother you even more, it seems. Now, would you just for a moment look at me, and as you do, you'll find your eyes will begin to grow tired and heavy, and they'll gradually begin to close. Heavier and heavier, more and more relaxed, sinking, drifting.
Because he is experienced in the procedure, Gervis is able to enter hypnosis in a relatively short time.
And you'll be able to find that you'll gain complete control again with your left hand making a fist by itself. As it does, all of the movement will go into your left hand, and all the movement will stop once your left hand has made the fist. When your fist opens, you'll feel more relaxed, sinking, drifting, and this comfortable, easy feeling, and you'll feel good. How do you feel? Good. With time, it should be possible for Gervis to learn to control the large involuntary movements and to essentially eliminate them. These are the movements that have a psychological basis. As far as the small tremor, his Parkinsonism is concerned, that is a neurological problem. But it is not what incapacitates him. He could lead a normal life despite the tremor. With hypnosis, he can even learn to control it.
A West African python can tie itself into such a tight knot, it can roll like a bowling ball. Believe it or not.
When you know you're going to be on stage, you want to make sure that you look your best and that you're properly dressed for the part. Appearance was especially important to a gentleman named Hugo Ball. He was a poet and a leader of an artistic movement called Dada. A hat like this was part of his costume, which looked like this. The number 13 on the cardboard tube that covered his face had nothing or everything to do with his performance. Dada artists didn't claim to make sense, but they did want to make unconventional artistic statements, most of them as a form of social protest. In this case, the statement included waving a small flag while reciting a nonsensical poem. The poem was written and first performed by Hugo Ball in Zurich in 1916. And it remains to this day a classic example of what Mr. Ball called sound poetry. Here's what it sounds like. A totally imaginary language invented by Mr. Ball. Kawani jolifanto blumba o fali hambla. Grossiga me pafla habla horami gaga gorman. Hai globlo aikora sula huju. Holaka holala. An logobang, blagobang baso futaka. Ooh. Shampa uwala wasa. Olobo. Hechtada gorame sej zumbada. Wulubu susuba de uluwa susuba de tamba. Baumf. Kasagama. Baumf. It didn't make any sense but it wasn't supposed to make any sense. But nevertheless, Mr. Ball's performance got a rousing ovation and turned out not to be a passing fancy, but a new art form, sound poetry. In Toronto, Canada, the sound of a solo bass clarinet marks this renovated factory as the regular meeting place of a group of world-renowned sound poets called the Four Horsemen. Musician Steve McCaffrey is a respected critic and literary theorist. He also performs frequently with a musical group called The Last of the Red Hot Dadas. Another member of the Four Horsemen is B.P. Nicol, a recipient of Canada's prestigious Governor-General's Award for Poetry. He also writes books for children that utilize the harmonic principles of sound poetry.
Milk on a plate, milk in the sink, give it to me, give me a drink. In any of these poems I've written for children, be it this one about milk here, or say this one here that I've written for my daughter called Digabada Bugada, there are certain basic elements that are the same through all of them. And for instance, this phrase, Digabada Bugada, is a phrase my daughter used to say when I'd come in to wake her up in the morning. Digabada Bugada beep, my daddy's still asleep. Digabada Bugada bake, I wonder when he'll wake. Digabada Bugada bib, I'm lying in my crib. Digabada Bugada bout, I think that I'll climb out and wake my daddy up. Digabada Bugada bop. So you can hear, I mean, the phrase itself is a nonsense phrase, except it was very meaningful to Sarah, so that's one thing. And in child babble, you get that, which is something of what you hear often in sound poems.
Critically acclaimed poet Rafael Barreto Rivera is the third member of the group. Another well-established Canadian poet, Paul Dutton, completes the quartet. With his arrival, the rehearsal of a new work in progress can begin.
A bit on the literal side there at the end.
Not bad.
By experimenting with pure sound, the group hopes to explore new ways to break through the limitations of language to create direct, emotional communication. The roof of the building often becomes the setting for an impromptu picnic. The four poets can plan future performances and reflect on past accomplishments. Although most critics have uniformly praised their work, some audiences have been less than overwhelmed.
When an audience gets hostile, gets angry maybe, they walk out, they boo, whatever, I find that, in fact, a very good response. It's a lot better than the kind of suppressed and non-emotional response you often get to a regular poetry reading.
We've done what we've done, I think, mostly because we've enjoyed it. And the reason we're still doing it after all these years of working as individuals or as a collective, I think is simply because we have a lot of fun at it.
For the Four Horsemen, pure sound is pure art. For the people in the Italian village of Monforte d'Alba, however, pure sound provides a perfect excuse for a festival. Once each year, visitors and local residents sign up to compete in a contest called the Festival of Free Screaming. As many as 5,000 people come to watch and listen while judges determine which of the contestants has the loudest scream. Starting with the children, the judges use special machines to calculate scream power.
104 sempre.
After the youngsters compete, festival managers introduce veteran screamers who have developed championship techniques.
114.
For some, the festival is a form of opera. For others, it's a call of the wild.
112.
As the contest ends, winners and losers alike gather to do it one more time.
Nose prints were at one time used to identify dogs on insurance policies. Believe it or not. Near Denver, Colorado. All of this finely honed equipment is designed to simulate the conditions of space so that astronauts can get the feel of what it's like to handle one of these, a manned maneuvering unit. The helmet is for safety and for communications. But in space, this backpack is not attached to all this elaborate machinery. The controls, however, are the same. And once you learn how to use them by taking a ride in the simulator, you can move through space as easily as a fish moves through water. An astronaut receives about 18 hours of training in this simulator, and then, with luck, he or she is ready to become part of mankind's greatest adventure.
13, 12.
The launch procedure has become routine. Yet each shuttle flight is a new beginning.
Start. 3, 2, 1. Solid ignition and liftoff.
To reach the silent grandeur of space, the shuttle first had to be perfected on Earth. Carried aloft under the wing of a B-52 bomber, an early prototype proved a new aerodynamic concept. An aircraft without wings and without power could be controlled in flight and guided to a safe landing. In time, designers developed a working scale model of their radical new concept. To find out if it would work, they put it through a series of intentionally destructive tests. From the wreckage, scientists learned what they had to know to begin a program of design and construction. Ultimately, the program would take 17 years and to date has cost almost $14 billion. To manipulate such complex equipment in space, the program also required the training of a whole new generation of astronauts. Until then, space was the exclusive domain of pilots. Shuttle missions, however, demanded the additional expertise of scientists and skilled technicians willing and able to do the job. To qualify,
candidates must take off on earthbound flights that duplicate, if only for a few seconds, the weightless conditions of space. Learning how to handle an elaborate machine called a remote manipulator arm is also basic training for prospective mission specialists. It will be their job to launch or retrieve multi-million-dollar satellites. By practicing the maneuver in full-scale mock-ups, specialists perfect the skills they'll need in space, where mistakes are simply not supposed to happen. No detail of training or equipment is left to chance. All the protective suits worn by shuttle astronauts are made here by hand. It takes about 2 months to make each suit because the people who work at this fabricating plant in Frederica, Delaware, are determined to make sure each item is fail-safe. In space, the slightest flaw could be fatal. A spacesuit is actually a miniature spaceship, complete with a built-in life support system. To make sure the astronauts are able to move freely while wearing them, one man's full-time job is to get inside every suit and put it through a series of tests. Simple movements representing the actions an astronaut will have to perform in space must be repeated hundreds and thousands of times without undue stress and with no damage to any part of the suit. It's not the suit, but the person inside the suit who is put to the test here in Houston, Texas. By being submerged, astronauts can learn to work with heavy equipment just as they will have to do in space. Surrounded by divers to assist in case of emergency, with their movements constantly monitored, astronauts practice using the manned maneuvering unit. Once the techniques are mastered, the confines of the tank are replaced by the limitless reaches of space. In orbit, 150 miles above the Earth, astronauts are no longer bound by the law of gravity. For them, there is no up, no down, and no need to walk when they can float. The lack of gravity complicates eating, but it also adds an element of surprise to every meal. On board the shuttle, laying down to go to sleep can be done in any position. Astronauts simply slip into sleeping bags and attach themselves to the floor, the ceiling, or walls. Unless restrained, their arms float freely in zero gravity, just as they would if they were not tucked in so snugly. Experiments on board the shuttle are proving that man can survive for long periods of time in space and ultimately overcome the disorientation created by the lack of gravity. The reaction of monkeys and other animals to what's called space adaptation syndrome is also being studied.
What we have here is
As part of the research, insects have also been passengers aboard the shuttle.
An experiment involving honeybees was devised and observed in a shuttle mock-up on Earth by a young Tennessee student named Dan Poskovich. He wanted to know what effect weightlessness would have on the ability of bees to construct a honeycomb. The answer from space was reassuring. As Dan observed, the bees went about their business as usual. The orbiting shuttle is able to perform experiments that would be impossible on Earth. A fragile solar panel designed to capture the energy of the sun is carried aloft in a package that is only 7 inches thick. When it is fully deployed, however, it extends for over 100 feet, about the height of a 10-story building, the largest structure ever assembled in space. Such successful experiments are only part of the shuttle's mission. Another regular task is the launching of satellites. It's entirely likely that the program you're watching right now is being transmitted to you from outer space. For space shuttle astronauts, launching satellites is easy. Making service calls takes a bit more effort. The first step is getting inside the spacesuit that permits them to leave the shuttle. Once through an airlock opening into the cargo bay, the mission specialist takes control of a manned maneuvering unit. There are no safety lines, no tether to prevent the astronaut from simply floating away. The mission is monitored, but the astronaut is flying solo. Although the shuttle seems to be motionless, in reality, it and the free-floating astronaut are both moving through space at a speed of 17,500 miles an hour. The astronaut is entirely dependent on the maneuvering unit to bring him safely home from a solitary journey into space. Unlimbered from the cargo bay, the remote manipulator arm snakes out toward a satellite to be rescued. Once the astronaut makes contact, the maneuvering unit will provide enough power to tow the satellite to within reach of the arm's grappling mechanism. On Earth, the satellite's dense package of electronics weighs about 5 tons. In space, it weighs nothing. Missions like these are not isolated adventures. They are part of a dream that is no longer impossible. With the experience and expertise gained with each shuttle flight, mankind is moving closer to the day when space can be colonized, when entire communities will circle the Earth in permanent orbit. Plans for the construction of a space colony are already in work. These are actual NASA projections. First, a massive framework will be suspended in orbit. Then, on consecutive flights, the shuttle will deliver a series of modules which the manipulator arm will put into place. Each module is large enough to house 6 people. Each one, however, will have a different purpose: housing, recreation, storage, workstations, and laboratories. Ultimately, all the modules will be interconnected so that inside, colonists can work, and live in a shirt-sleeve environment as comfortable as this NASA mock-up of the space station they propose. With the freedom zero gravity provides, there is no limit to the potential size of the colony. In time, the colony can expand to include manufacturing facilities, agricultural experimentation, and even a nursery for infants born in space. It is a dream, but then less than 30 years ago, the exploration of space was a dream. Florida diver Spencer Slate feeds a deadly 80-pound barracuda by letting it eat from his own mouth. Believe it or not.
It looks easy, but there's more to having your picture taken than primping, posing, and saying cheese. To get a picture that's just right, it takes a lot of elaborate equipment and a photographer with the eye of an artist, like Kevin Clark. I'm in his New York studio, and it may look like he's focusing his attention on me. He's not. The star of this photo session is this battered old red couch. Since 1979, it's been photographed thousands of times in hundreds of locations all over the country. It's a wonder that it's survived. This sofa's been hauled in trucks, vans, planes, canoes, and even on a dog sled. It's been buried in sand, mired in mud, suspended from helicopters, and sat on by an incredible variety of people. 2 photographers were involved in the project, American Kevin Clark and German Horst Wackerbarth. Their idea was to create a portrait of America with the couch as a unifying theme. They succeeded magnificently. The result is a book that's a work of art, and the diary of an adventure that lasted almost 5 years. The journey of the red couch began here, on Crosby Street in New York, when Kevin Clark and his friend, artist Russell Maltz, were moving the couch. On a whim, reenacted here, Kevin asked his friend to pose for a quick snapshot. From that accidental beginning came the idea to carry the couch around the United States and to use it as a centerpiece in an unusual series of American portraits. In Monument Valley, the couch created a new perspective of a classic American scene. It was also photographed on the floor of the American Stock Exchange, nibbled on by wild ponies in Virginia, and used the space shuttle as a backdrop.
This is an Amish family in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Horst approached the accountant who handles the dealings of the Amish people with the outside world. He checked his computer and found 3 families that he thought might go along with our request to make a portrait. The first family we asked complied, but when they saw the actual couch on the day of the shoot, they wanted to back out. They reluctantly agreed to go ahead with the portrait when we suggested we place the couch very much in the background, in the back of the field. This is Jim Brunson at the Westin Peachtree Plaza Hotel in Atlanta. He's a window washer. This is his everyday workplace. We worked for a couple of days securing the couch to the scaffold. And when it came time to make the shot, Jim just clambered out on the couch. I said, "Look, Jim, we don't need any heroes here. Why don't you put on your belt?" So he did. I hung over the side of the building, made the photograph of Jim in his everyday environment.
The strength of the portraits lies in the way the couch is placed in unexpected environments. In New York, Kevin and his assistant put it in front of a bank in the Wall Street area. For hours, Kevin unsuccessfully asked banker types to pose on the couch. Finally, he found a subject who agreed to be photographed.
Oh, this is Chester C. Burley III, an investment banker in the Wall Street area in New York.
Mr. Burley walked by, dressed for a presentation. I described the project to him, asked if he would sit for the portrait, and he looked at his watch and said, "I'll return in 22 minutes." Exactly 22 minutes later, Chester appeared, sat on the couch, and we made the shot. This is Dr. Nathan Klein, psychiatrist, photographed in his New York office. While Horst was making this photograph, he left the cushions in the hallway, prepared the shot, set the couch, placed Dr. Klein on the chair, went back to get the cushions, and they were gone. We later heard that a doctor had come upon the cushions, picked them up, took them to a utility room, laid down, and took a nap for a couple of hours. Horst went ahead, made the photograph, and really liked the couch laid bare of all its secrets and without its cushions.
Horst Wackerbarth, here in a candid grouping of Playboy bunnies, was the other member of the photography team. The two photographers shared this van to move the couch from location to location. In time, however, a duplicate was made so that the two men could pursue different artistic approaches. Although the van was the principal means of transportation, it was not the only way the couch was brought to a location. During the 5-year expedition, the couch was balanced on a canoe in Alaska and put behind bars in a New York City jail. It was also used for a portrait of a family living next to the 3 Mile Island nuclear reactor.
This is Robert Kleibert at his Hammond, Louisiana alligator farm. There are 500 of them in that pool, and they're all 16 to 18 feet long. An alligator can outrun a dog for 30 yards. And it's pretty dangerous to be up close with a wide-angle lens photographing those alligators. Mr. Kleibert was holding the stick to bop them on the head if they got a little too close to us. This is Alan Bean, former astronaut, photographed at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. Mr. Bean is wearing the spacesuit that he wore on the moon. He was the 4th human being to step foot on the moon. I used the couch as a monolith, similar to the monolith in 2001, The Space Odyssey, and waited until the full moon rose above Clear Lake, forming a triangular, very basic composition. This is the last photograph of the Red Couch book.
When Horst Wackerbarth and Kevin Clark completed their project in 1984, they decided that the Red Couch should be retired. Today, Kevin said, why not just one more? That's why we're here at the Dugal Color Lab, where it all began. And what we've got here is the last portrait of the Red Couch that'll ever be made. Maybe.
For most chefs, tossing a salad is an art. But in Thailand, one inventive cook has taken the idea to the extreme. When you place an order with him, you get more than a meal. You get a show. The basic ingredient is chopped up vegetables. However, it's not the garlic fish sauce or the spectacular flame braising that make the creations of Chef Clint Mahone so memorable. It's what happens next. The motto here is elegance in every move, which describes the chef and his assistant. Serving up such spectacular dishes has made Chef Clint Mahone a Thailand millionaire. Believe it or not.
The mysteries of aliens, the magic of Houdini, the miracles of angels. Now the real stories and events are explained in a thrilling original series, Mysteries, Magic, and Miracles, hosted by Patrick McNee.